Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. We'll be talking about misinformation, and of course one of the latest attack on Pakistan that we've seen as far as the Jaffar Express attack is concerned is a case in point of how misinformation, disinformation, propaganda has been used and the kind of fake news that is circulated so many times and in so many shapes and forms that it becomes the truth rather than what is the real picture, what is the reality. And countering that kind of disinformation, countering that kind of propaganda and its importance overall for Pakistan at this time, for our national narrative at this time, and overall so that it is not misused in the way that we saw very, very damagingly. And we saw the way that recently during this Jaffar Express propaganda machine, the way that it was taken up by the opposition, the way that it was used, and also other organizations also from outside Pakistan. We'll be talking particularly about this and its effects overall, and how does the government and overall how the media can be used also to clamp down on this kind of misinformation. All of that today on Perspective. I have with me Wajih Abbasi, who is a political analyst. Thank you for being with us today. We also have with us Muneeb Qadir, who is a political analyst, also a lawyer. Thank you for being with us today. And Ali Rashid of the PPP. He's also spokesperson Sindh government. Thank you for joining us today. Wajih sir, like I said, this incident, of course, it's the lowest of lows, and we've seen, how Pakistani men, our Jawans, army overall, and the way that, people were terrorized during this incident as far as Jaffar Express is concerned. The attack itself and the way that propaganda was used, to malign institutions, nothing less. How do you look at this, first of all? And, it has certainly become a kind of norm now. And of course, we've spoken about this countless times, how the need to clamp down on this kind of misinformation becomes more and more urgent as we talk.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First of all, let me congratulate the Jawans of Pakistan Army who conducted this very difficult operation in a far-flung area where there was no communication actually, and there was it was far from roads and road network, and they conducted and they freed all the passengers, all the hostages, and they killed all the terrorists. That's one thing. The other is the propaganda war, which started, as you know, the oft used slogan in propaganda war that you speak lies as so much that you believe in them. That is the Nazi propaganda war machine's slogan. And that's what it has always been in wars. The first casualty in war is always the truth. So this is actually a war, and in this the first casualty is truth. Now the instruments to spread those lies have become more powerful, and they have become more
more damaging.
More damaging in sense that previously you had there was print media and everything was used to come in the print media, and somebody who was reading a newspaper used to read everything. Now this social media has come in. Now you read only those things which you have interest in, or which you want to read.
And also, the algorithms are such that, of course, they keep on bringing up the stuff.
When you read something and the same thing will be coming to you. So you will be a victim of this same story. Now that this incident took place, and the broach separatists and terrorists, they started propagating those news that so many people have been killed and so many people were taken hostages and that type of things. Unfortunately, in our country, unfortunately in our society, there are people who frankly don't understand the difference between political differences with different political parties or institutions, and difference and the vital interests of the state. Now, the terrorists and the separatists, they are not like friends of
any political party.
They are not friends of any group of the society or any political party. But we, in order to get our own
benefit,
sort of
which is often short term.
Yes, short term gains. We try to become friends of them, become a tool in their hands to propagate their lies, and that was evident here in this incident also. Now there is. Of course, there was these changes in the PAC Act. We used.
Let's come to that. Come to that. Let me also take Muneeb on this. Muneeb, you know, if you heard what Wajih Sahab is saying, I think the one thing that I feel, you know, is something we keep hearing. It's a fact also that the worst casualty of war is the truth. You know, whether we agree or not, even, you know, we are at war for the truth in a sense. Because, you know, there is so much misinformation, there is so much propaganda that, again, you know, like we were earlier talking about, it becomes difficult for an educated person to sift through and, you know, come out with what is accurate. And with regard to this Jaffar Express incident, I want to keep coming to this because it's really, you know, a case in point. It really illustrates where and how things go wrong. Because, you know, we saw how state institutions were blamed. We also saw, you know, how digital activists of one particular political party, you know, pushed the narratives to those heights where it became, you know, far from the truth. The truth was that, you know, the military performed heroic operation. We know that now, and you know, the truth was that the brave men of our army, the way that they fought and the way, you know, they managed to make this operation as ineffective as possible is perhaps unparalleled. But that truth had to go through a barrage of propaganda. Isn't that true? And you know, we keep talking about the PICA Act, which is what Wajih Sahab was coming to. But the question is that, again, where does the buck stop and where is it about your national interest? I'm not calling anybody, I'm not saying nobody, you know, anybody is not patriotic, but the question is that there has to be a point where you know that, you know, this agenda is against Pakistan. And this agenda is something that, therefore, we cannot go towards. Do you think there is such a point for all political parties?
Well, in this day and age, I believe disinformation rather than information has become the new currency. So anybody who can peddle disinformation in such a way so as to spread it like wildfire within a matter of seconds and minutes is the richest person in a way, or the most influential person. So I think that in this day and age of social media and artificial intelligence and deep fake technology, you know, the dynamics of what it entails to be influential have changed so drastically that it's very difficult for anybody, for any one of us, you know, be it you or be it I, to process just, you know, what kind of what information we're receiving and how do we filter out irrelevant and misleading and even dangerous information, disinformation from what is relevant information, what are the true facts on the ground. So yes, you're absolutely right with regard to the, you know, Jaffar Express hostage situation, which lasted for almost or even more than a day. The kind of disinformation that was being peddled was not just coming from one source, it was coming from so many sources. And so on the one hand, you had our forces battling it out on the ground, as it were, and then, you know, there were those who wanted to filter out the correct information from disinformation. And so they were also fighting in the digital space, which has in itself become a battlefield in our times. So yes, I don't understand why, but our neighboring country on our eastern border, they had gone into a frenzy. I mean, their news channels, and even now their news channels, were replete with Pakistan-related, Jaffar Express-related, you know, news, as if they did not have any troubles or problems of their own. Actually, there are so many insurgent movements there, in their country, they need to look into that. And this came at a time when the Adani Group, which is so close to Narendra Modi, India's Prime Minister, they should have been questioning how come he was able to operate his businesses and his factory so close to the India-Pak border. So, those are the kinds of things that our neighboring countries needed to concentrate upon. But why is it? What stakes did they have? That all the concentration was.
Isn't it true that this is also something that's circular? Because, and this is across the board in some sense, that we always criticize, and it's okay to criticize each other, it's okay to criticize policy, it's okay to criticize each other. But the question is that there's a point, or there's a, where you feel that this is against Pakistan. When the people there, there were Pakistani lives there. And the question is that who is going to educate our political people, as a whole, who is going to educate our political parties about where the buck stops? I will come back to you. I want to ask Ali this particularly. Ali, where do you think the buck will stop? Because of course you represent a political party, a very old political party, in terms of, where it's about your national interest, where it's about what's good for the country. Is it still important to criticize each other? Is it still important to criticize each other's policies? And perhaps some of it can be done indoors, but does it have to be on social media and in this manner that it can lead to a kind of false propaganda that helps those that perpetrated the attack?
MAHRUKH, you're absolutely right. I still want to give PTI or any political party that leverage, that even if you want to come on, forget about closed doors, even if you want to come forward and go on social media and have a difference of opinion, criticize, say whatever you want, you're entitled to that. Even if we are in a state of war or whatever, I still feel that they should be given that leverage. But what I'm trying to get to here is, that's not what's happening here. You see, it's not PTI just giving the difference of opinion or trying to criticize that how things are being handled. It's manipulation, political manipulation. It's an agenda which they're towing. They're using bots. They're using AI fake, deep fake videos. They are targeting the institutions. They're targeting different, they're making the morale of this country and the people. This is like a misinformation campaign. There's no question about it. If this was a case where they just wanted to share their thoughts, it's, freedom of speech, they're more than welcome to do that. But the fact that there are no official IDs, they're like bots being used to, beat a narrative down, which is fake, and then deep fake videos, using AI to, manipulate things. That's exactly what's happening. And what was even more disturbing in this entire Jaffar Express incident was PTI's social media handles were in tune with the Indian media outlets. Whatever was coming from there was being retweeted by PTI. Whatever PTI was posting was being retweeted by them, and so on and so forth. So I would like to give them the benefit of the doubt, and I would feel that, please, you're freedom of expression, or you can express whatever. But if your intention is malified, if your entire narrative you're building is false and is to target the institutions, to harm the country, to destabilize the country, to destabilize the government, and in the process harm the country, then I'm against that. And that's exactly what's happening here. And we have evidence, and it's very crystal clear that what exactly went down. So this is not a debate about since we are in a state of war, should we criticize each other openly, or should we do it in closed doors? It's not about that. It's a totally different tangent. These guys are attacking the institutions. They are fabricating information. They are doing propaganda. They're making deep fake videos. And at a time like this, it's very unfortunate, but that's true.
As a political party, have you never done so? You think that, you've reached that kind of political maturity, the PPP as a political party, that you realize that, it is the cost of it, and you step back from it? Or do you think that, it is something that all political parties have done from time to time?
In my personal opinion and personal experience, I've been in politics for the past 20 years now. I've been a member of the Preferential Assembly, a member of the National Assembly. Currently, I'm Special Assistant to the CM. In my 20 years of political experience, I've never seen a political party target any institution like this systematically. Criticizing is totally different. But having, making up information and siding with some countries which may be considered your enemies with their intelligence agencies, with their media outlets, and creating panic in the country. You see, it's totally, no political party has ever done this in my opinion. And in the past, even I think MQM in the past may have done 1/10 of what PTI is doing. And look what happened to them. There was a massive operation against them. The London side, with the Pakistan, the Pakistan fraction of it had to, disown the leader in the UK, and so on and so forth. But I've never seen any political party do this. This is just crazy. It's like harming the country. It's not harming any government or any political party. It's just creating panic, and it's like whose side are you on? Are you on like the?
Let me include Wajih Saab. I'll come back to you. Wajih Saab, you heard what Muneeb said, and then Ali also. Overall, do you think that there's an argument that is made, from time to time of the China model? When we look at the cyber laws, when we look at the way that information is spread, when we look at the information that we are given access to, and then of course invariably the argument is it's about freedom of speech. Where do you think that line comes? Where one, is it now important to filter the information to that extent, because it's clearly damaging our institutions, it's clearly damaging in this instance our image in international world?
Freedom of information, wherever you see it, you see Article 19 of our Constitution, of the fundamental rights anywhere in the world. They are not, like total freedom. There is nothing like absolute freedom. What they say is that your interest comes in. I mean,
it has to be about your national interest.
National interest. You have to take into consideration national interest. You have to take into consideration laws, and you have to take into consideration the other sides' rights also. I mean, your rights are not absolute. Your rights are conditioned to my rights, or other rights. So it's not absolute. So there have to be some sort of limitations to it. And those limitations are ingrained in every constitution in the world. Even the UN Charter of Human Rights has those limitations.
But do you think that we need stronger limitations? Does this highlight that in your opinion?
These limitations are already there. In the constitution, it's already there. In the law, it's already there. Unfortunately, there are, we don't apply laws equally on everybody. We have this pick and choose policy. And then in this pick and choose policy, some people think that they have more rights than others. Okay. They have more rights than others. So these, when somebody gets leverage somewhere, he takes it as its right, basic right to get those leverage, and then he tries to expand that speech. That is what happened in this country in last last 4 or 5 years. That when you gave leverage to some political party on our people,
it becomes difficult to control.
It's difficult to control. When you give leverage, it becomes difficult to control, and that is what has happened now. That laws are there. Laws are there to, but it's not. But we are very lenient to in applying those laws.
Okay, fair enough. Muneeb, do you think? I mean, I know as a lawyer, we know about the kind of legislation that's in the field. We know about there are so many issues as far as spreading false information is concerned, yet there are laws. I mean, you and I both know there is also talk of stricter laws. First of all, do you think that it is about implementation, or do you think that it is about perhaps, when we do allow, when this kind of loophole does exist, when this kind of propaganda does filter through, then what does it say? Do we need stricter laws? Do we need stricter implementation? What do we need?
I believe that the legal framework is very strict already as it is, and I have never been a fan of censorship. But I have always advocated for the fact that, just as one of my honorable co-panelists mentioned, that free speech is not an absolute right. So you cannot go on and peddling disinformation, and particularly dangerous disinformation, which can incite violence or hate speech or defamatory speech. So those kinds of things, of course, you cannot indulge into. And it's not just Pakistan, all the major jurisdictions, particularly all the major common law jurisdictions, they have such laws in place. My problem is not with the concept of law, which addresses these menaces of hate speech and tries to control them, because your words are not just words, and in this day and age they don't just stay concentrated wherever they're spoken, but they are spread over a long period of time and in long spaces as well. So the problem is that all the efforts which are going into implementing and enforcing these laws, they need to be directed towards the right cause and not be misdirected. So for instance, if there is anybody, and by anybody I mean to say that person might fall under whatever pretext, political pretext or religious pretext or whatever pretext, they are trying to create a situation of a situation which presents threat to law and order, try to create violence or mayhem across the country, across cities, across towns, then those are exactly the kinds of people against whom these laws need to be applied. And on the other hand, there are those who dissent, and dissenting peacefully is a fundamental right. Those are the very kinds of people that need to be protected. Coming to opposition in Pakistan, the opposition parties, they could have played a very productive role in presenting an opposing point of view to current policies. They could have had exercised their political dissent in a constructive manner, but instead what they did was, just as Mr. Ali also mentioned here, somehow they were echoing the narrative that was being peddled by our very hyper, our eastern neighbors, very hyper media, and it's extremely hyper nationalistic media. And there was this frenzy and a sense of everything getting out of control, everything getting out of our country's control. And so what that does is that to the listener, it creates a sense of panic, but also a sense of as if we're losing control, and anybody and everybody is free to take the law into their hands, and that's dangerous. So that's why I'm saying extremists, wherever they are, wherever they feel that they are above the state, they are the ones upon whom a crackdown is necessary. And a crackdown, by a crackdown I mean within the legal framework that is already.
But then how do you deal with, I want your opinion on this, and then Ali's also, that, then how do you deal with that victim, playing victim that we've seen recently? The moment you crack down on a certain segment, a certain political party, a certain opposition, you will invariably have that same narrative of how, they are being victimized, they are being, marginalized, we've seen. And that also takes its own beat. It has a replay of its own proportions. So how does one deal with that? And then you said, and I think a lot of people here, most of us agree, that we don't want there to be a total ban on anything. But the question is that those that propagate for the China model argue exactly that this is why we need perhaps to go towards that.
That's such a pertinent question, such a good question. And there's this, so I've set this criteria that if we want to differentiate between the kind of speech that needs to be cracked down upon versus the kind of speech that needs to be tolerated, the dividing line between both of these is whether through their words they are likely to incite violence and physical violence against both the state as well as private citizens or private entities. If your words are likely to have that effect, and we could use a test of forcibility for that, a legal test of forcibility and remoteness, then yes, crackdown needs to take place against such elements in accordance with the law. Also, you need to see and check the sources of whatever information that are coming, because nowadays what happens is overnight we see that there's a mushroom growth of so many vlogs and blogs. You don't just fall for what they're telling you. You don't just fall for WhatsApp forwarded messages, but you look at what the sources are. So if, for example, the source is Amnesty International, if it's Human Rights Watch, yes, take that seriously. But on the other hand, if the source is somebody who's politically partisan and on a political agenda or a dangerous terrorist agenda, and again, identifying what terrorism is should not be difficult. There's a definition to terrorism, and that is where you are likely to or are actually involved in inciting violence through your actions and words, then that is terrorism, and particularly when that violence is targeted against state institutions as well as unarmed civilians. So when there is a lot of training that needs to be done at the enforcement level.
Let me go to Ali on this. Ali, do you agree? You think that more training has to be done? Do you think over time we will be able to decipher the information? But then the question is, hasn't damage already been done in a lot of cases? Muneeb also said this, and we all know that, the way that it was taken up across the border, this information, and how this disinformation is used because it's coming from our own, and the way that it's played up. And we saw, Indian TV channels really play it up. It's a case in point for how it becomes, it's recycled, it takes new shapes and forms, it becomes, more and more difficult to really differentiate, right?
Absolutely. You see, I think what we need to do is crack down hard against these people who are involved in it. You see, the laws we have, the PICA Act or whatever, it's not much different than if you look at EU laws, and recently India has also amended their laws. So I think everybody's realized that a lot of harm can be done by misinformation. So everybody's getting strict with the legislation when it comes to cybercrime. After all, it is a crime like any other crime, so it should be dealt with like it has. And I feel that now the time has come that PTI as a political party cannot benefit from this false narrative and get all the political mileage and the sympathy, and as well as disown itself from this political social media thing. Anytime you approach them, they'll try to look like, the grieved party. They look like the being, unko diwar se lagaya ja raha hai. At the same time, when the authorities approach them with the tweets or anything posted on social media from their official handles, they say we have no control, this is being handled from some other country, and these are, either you disown it, either you write to X and all these other platforms that this verified handle which is being used under our name is not ours, or either you own it. So I think this game cannot continue where they continue doing these things and then keep disowning it, and every leader, if you speak to them, they'll blame the other leader, and then the other leader will say this is happening from Germany or some other country or in Europe somewhere. So we need to...
Source can be anywhere. Yeah. The question is, Ali, for all political parties, do you think that, whether we can come to some sort of, we keep on talking about, we've spoken to you about this a countless number of times about how, there have been meetings, there have been talks, and they, unfortunately don't go through with the opposition. Do you think there can be, like we saw earlier on between the PPP and the PMLN, during, Muhtarma's life, we saw, these alliances, the Democratic Alliance, and there, so there was some medium, there was some bar. Do you think there is a possibility of having that kind of a tacit agreement with all political parties that, there can be opposition, there can be criticisms, but there has to be a bar beyond which we will not go as a nation?
Absolutely. I think that needs to be done, and that would be ideal. But, with PTI, with the leadership being in array, it keeps dissolving the committees and nominating new people. The chief minister from KP, he's got a big forward block, people who are against him within the party. Then you have Sher Afzal Marwat, who just got kicked out. So, it's very difficult. These people have to really get their house in order. So if they are univocal, they have their house in order, then we can also approach people and have a nice dialogue and come to terms. If people are not accepting.
But we can also do this, and before I go to Wajih Saab, I think this is a question for Muneeb. Muneeb, this can also be done through legislation, can't it? I mean, it can become part of your, whether we talk about, charter of your political parties, it can be in the constitution, just broadly speaking off the top of my head. But, this can be we can phrase it in such a manner that it becomes a part of when you are in public life, when you are in politics, it becomes, and I was listening to the oath recently of, when public officials take oath, for example, or cabinet members take oath, isn't it also part of their, as members, don't they have to have, isn't there already a standard?
There is, I mean, heavy is the head which wears the crown, and when you hold public office, you assume a position of influence or power, whatever you want to call it. Then of course you have to speak responsibly, and then there's a particular code of conduct that you have to abide by, no less contained within our own constitution. And it's not an easy burden to discharge, by the way. So the irresponsibility with which I see so many politicians now currently, the opposition, with which they speak, and the sense of impunity they have, this is exactly what we cannot tolerate. So you did talk about, dissent, or, those people who are cracked down upon, they then claim to be victims. Well, there has to be intolerance towards intolerance. So the only tolerance needs to be towards those who express their disagreement, their dissent through peaceful means. They want to enter into dialogue with the government and the state. They have every single right protected under our constitution as well as under our international commitments to have their voices heard, and their voices need to be heard. But where a particular political party or political entity, they believe that they're above the state, and that they can co-opt hostile forces beyond our borders and also create unrest within our borders, then that is exactly where the writ of the state needs to be felt, and indiscriminately so. No favors, no, as there's that Urdu word ladla, no ladla culture. So yes, and we also need a new charter of democracy between all political parties, in which they need to solemnly take an oath that they shall never ever ever endanger anybody's life or the security of the state as part of their political narrative.
Do you think that, Ali, we can move towards that? I think isn't that a better way forward if all political parties can take such an oath?
I think, yeah, that would be ideal, but after taking this oath, I think you should also stick to that oath, because some parties are known for U-turns. They'll come to terms, they'll agree with things, and then next moment they won't be sticking to it. So I think for the greater national interest of the country, I think all political parties should understand that this cannot continue the way it is. And I think the establishment and other authorities have been pretty lenient, in my opinion. Although there's like a lot of hue and cry by the PTI about how there's an operation against them and they're getting arrested and they're being harassed. I think they're not. I seriously think they're not. I've seen in the political history of Pakistan, I've seen political parties for going through much worse, for doing much less. And I think it's about time that we should, with iron fist, deal with any such elements. And if PTI, either you tell PTI, these are people who are involved. If you will own them, then you as a party are involved in this. But if you don't, we will take action across the board. Let it be any political party, let it be anybody, because this is now your national interest, right? Now it's not about politics. It's not about any smaller.
Yeah. Right. Wajih Saab, do you think we can move towards that? Do you think it's a good thing for all political parties to take such an oath? Because this is not just one case. Of course, this is a recently, it illustrates the way that it's been done. But we saw, of course, if we look at, the way letters were written to the IMF, or, if we look at the cipher there's a continuation here. And it applies across the board to all political parties. If all political parties can move towards this, there should really be no objection to taking such an oath, right?
Frankly, it's a very noble
idea. Think
it's a noble idea,
but it's not practical.
I don't think it's practical. I don't think it's probable.
Okay.
Just take one incident. On 27 February 2019, India attacked Pakistan. And it was for the first time since 1971, since December 16, 1971, that India had crossed into Pakistan and bombed our territory. That was a very serious thing. On that day, the political parties in the parliament, the leaders of political parties were to discuss that issue. And the Prime Minister Imran Khan didn't attend that meeting because he wasn't willing to talk to his opponents on any because that was very important. The Prime Minister should have been the one who must have been asking the others to attend.
Take everybody on board. Yes.
But he wasn't willing to do that. Now, we can't have more important things like that. After that, what happens? I don't think PTI is going to.
But Wajih Sahab, haven't there been, am I being too naive when I say that haven't there been instances when our political parties, all of them have come together? For example, we do so on Kashmir.
So, we have been having a culture where political parties, whenever they were, even if they were fierce opponents, they used to come to table on different issues. I remember when there was, the People's Party and other political parties didn't participate in 1985 elections. They didn't recognize that parliament. They didn't recognize General Zia-ul-Haq's rule. And they didn't recognize the Prime Minister Junijo, late Junijo. But on the eve of the Geneva Accord, when there was a point for political parties to get united on this future of Afghanistan, he called a meeting of political parties, and Benazir Bhutto and other political leaders of other political parties, they attended that meeting. And they gave the Prime Minister go ahead to sign the Geneva Accords. So, you see the 1965, even in 1971, even after that, and even at the time of these Indian nuclear tests, all political parties joined together and consulted on important issues. But unfortunately, since the emergence of PTI, there is between the PPP and the PMLN, the Democratic Alliance that during Mohtarma's we saw that also. When in early 1990s, the differences and the bitterness between PMLN and PPP was even greater than what is today between PTI and other political parties.
But they managed
this
to.
This is, this PTI and other political parties, particularly PMLN, there is no ideological difference as such.
Right.
On PPP, PMLN, there was ideological difference also. But even during those times, you remember there was in 1993, in 1997, when People's Party's government was ousted, and then there were elections and PMLN came to power. And then the government wanted to give more powers to Parliament and take away powers from the President, the President's power to dissolve the Parliament, all those things. And PPP came together with PMLN to amend the constitution and make that 13th Amendment and then 14th Amendment.
So there is history.
There is history. And despite the bitterness, despite all the cases against Benazir Bhutto, and despite the fact that Aswad Zardari was in jail,
they found the middle ground.
Yeah, they came together and they found they enacted that amendment. So this has been there, and we have that culture.
So there's no it has been done before.
Yes,
and it can be done.
It can be done. Yes.
Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. Thank you so much for joining us today. Wajih Abbasi Saab, thank you for your time. Muneeb Qadir, thank you for joining us today. Ali Rashid, thank you for being with us today. When we talk about disinformation, when we talk about misinformation that invariably churns out propaganda that influences, even those across the border and allows them to play information that is coming from our own country. It is clearly, time to reflect. It is clearly time for change. And when we look at today, when we have seen in the past, the way we discussed that when political parties could come together before, end their bitterness and move towards an era of some kind of political norms, some kind of a bar beneath which they will not go. Perhaps, there is a case for it, and perhaps we can again move towards towards that, where our interest, our national interest reigns supreme. And that is what matters overall. And there is again a level beyond which we will not go. Hoping for that, wishing for that in politics. And thank you so much for joining us today on Perspective.